When we're young, we daydream about what the future holds. Family, teachers, even our peers ask us who we want to be when we grow up. A firefighter, a fairy princess, a movie star. Maybe you want a big family, or maybe you plan to have exactly two daughters and two sons, and you have their names already picked out. My first plan was to become an artist, and I also wanted to be a mom to 5 kids someday. And then I changed my mind and decided that I was going to be an astronaut and live on Mars all alone. When we're young, our blueprint for the future changes constantly, and it's no issue. Because we haven't yet figured out who we are, we get to write and rewrite our plan forward. But what happens when we get to be a little bit older and we start to write that plan in ink? When we make decisions that have a lasting impact, do we get the chance to rewrite our blueprint then? When I was a teenager, I decided that I wanted to go into sciences. Specifically, I wanted to be a flight surgeon. I wanted to be a space doctor. It sounds like something straight out of a childhood dream. I had researched which programs I could attend and what credentials I would need and how many years I'd need to study to get there. My starting point was to enroll in a chemistry program when I arrived in university, except I didn't actually end up liking it. University chemistry was a lot different from high school, and suddenly the whole chain of education I had planned for myself was in jeopardy. My carefully crafted plan, rooted in what I had previously thought I knew and strong encouragement from those around me, started to fall apart in front of my eyes. Life has a funny way of seeing a well laid out plan and ripping it apart. So, what do we do when we're sitting with the pieces of a blueprint we thought would hold us together? I think we have to go back to that childlike sense of wonder, where we weren't afraid to move on to Plan B, or Plan C, or Plan D, or Plan Y, where we were okay taking in new pieces of information and going back to the drawing board is where we need to be now. When you're 5 and you want to be a doctor someday, it makes sense until you get a little bit older and decide that isn't right, and then it doesn't make sense anymore. And so you move on to deciding that you're going to be a secret agent. Easy as that. Each day, when we're young, we're gathering the information we need to build our guide forward. But what I don't think many people realize is that you don't stop gathering those pieces of information when you become an adult. We're all constantly working on the idea of our future with new pieces showing up every day. Maybe you've always wanted to move to Vancouver, but you fall in love with someone who says they'll never leave their hometown. Or maybe you plan to go back to school, but those plans are shifted because you're starting a family. When I pictured the blueprint of my life, I saw a big sheet of paper with an outline that showed blanks to be filled in as you go. What I've come to realize, though, is that it's more like a complicated puzzle where some pieces we get to fit in ourselves and others have already been chosen for us. And every day we get new pieces, and for that I'm grateful. If I'd only ever paid attention to the very first piece that said artist, I would be drawing a lot of stick figures today. Or if I had decided that my puzzle was complete when I found the piece that said flight surgeon, or that I thought said flight surgeon. I didn't understand what that piece was trying to tell me until I saw the piece that made me realize that I wasn't suited for science. And none of this is easy. It's very hard to admit when you read your blueprint wrong, and it's even harder to admit it to others. I've tried to force pieces into my life puzzle that didn't belong because I didn't want to change my blueprint. I thought it was supposed to be a permanent reflection of my path forward, not a living, evolving thing that grew with me. So why are so many of us stuck on the idea of having one clear path in our lives? Well, a lot of recent research shows that our lives today won't follow a straight path in the way that many generations before us did. This was the example that was set for us, but the ways that our society has changed means that things like career trajectories aren't the same as they used to be. Baby boomers are likely to have spent most of their careers with a select few organizations, and Gen X will stay in jobs up to 20% longer than later generations. But millennials and Gen Zs, on the other hand, will change careers up to a dozen times. And some futurists even predict that the next generation may hold up to 40 jobs in their lifetime. The later generation is also dating more, getting married later, and sometimes not even getting married at all. Millennials are waiting on average 5 years longer to get married than previous generations, and a quarter of millennials are estimated to never marry. The world has changed, and along with it, the way we expect our lives to unfold is changing as well. So if you're looking at your blueprint and maybe you aren't happy with it, or you're standing, just like I did, with one that has fallen apart, I have a few pieces of advice to offer. Number 1, learn to make your notes in pencil, not pen. It's tempting to lay out a 10-year plan, complete with every life change you could imagine, but the odds of that being anywhere close to accurate is slim. Having an idea of where you're going is good, but when you accept that you also won't truly know what's next until you get there, it's a lot easier to accept those inevitable changes that happen in life. Number 2, don't try to fill in the blanks too soon. It's easy to look at the pieces of your story that you've already assembled and assume it shows you everything you need to know. There are some blanks, sure, but you can make a pretty good guess as to what goes into those pieces. But I think if what we guessed was always true, that would make for an incredibly boring life. Imagine knowing what's coming next forever. No coffee shop meet cute that changes your life because you plan to meet your partner at school. Don't assume that just because you have some pieces, you have them all figured out. I've found it quite embarrassing to announce that I've gotten it figured out, only to realize that I have nothing figured out at all. And when that fails, tip number 3 is don't be afraid to admit that you read the plan wrong. It's easy to get it wrong. I've done it lots, and not just my 5-year-old inner artist showing up. As an adult, I've settled on things that didn't work out. I've planned for things, and life showed up and threw a wrench in all of my plans, and I've had to swallow my pride and make changes. If you have the chance, I'd like you to do something with me. I'd like you to draw a puzzle. So take some paper and draw a big square, and then draw some squiggly lines to break it up into as many pieces as you'd like. Okay, now pick some pieces that you'd like to fill in and decide on some things to write in them. Maybe you love rock music, or family always comes first for you. Write down whatever comes to mind, but the key is to stop before you fill in every piece. Now, take a look at your blueprint. In my case, I was always deeply overwhelmed by all the missing pieces. How could there be so much I haven't figured out yet? But with time, I think I've come to appreciate the fact that my blueprint is only half finished. There's so much left for me to learn about the world, about myself. There are plot twists and happiness and sorrow that I haven't even considered yet. And that's pretty scary, but it's also pretty exciting in a way. And if it feels too overwhelming to look at all that blank space, I encourage you to set a big picture goal. Think about what you want your blueprint to look like when it's finished. Not the individual steps you want to take, but the big overall picture. What do you see? Happiness? Passion? Love? Anything is good. Instead of deciding what each piece of your blueprint will be, decide on what you want it to look like when it's done. And then focus on looking for the pieces that align with your end goal. No one knows where they're going, which is exactly why we have to have a blueprint to guide us. And when faced with uncertainty, it's great to have a guidebook lighting your way. That's part of why we're here today, hearing everyone's thoughts about blueprint. I would recommend that you just leave space for whatever comes next somewhere in your plan, so that you can appreciate all of life's twists and turns. So to sum it all up, I encourage you to reach back into your memory and remember what it was like to be free, to imagine that you could be anything at all, even a cowboy space princess or an artist. Look at your life and remember that it's not too late for you to become anything at all, even if it's not what you set out to do. It might take some more effort to change your path than it did when you were young, but it's still very much possible for you to look at your life today and know that anything could happen next. And personally, I think that's just so very exciting. Thank you.